Prophet Muhammad used to greet the students of knowledge by saying marhaba, welcome, welcome to the students of knowledge. And there's a very special place for the students of knowledge, for the seekers of ilm, of knowledge, within the context of Islam. There are many ayahs in the Quran that talk about the benefit of knowledge, and many of you are familiar with them. I'm just familiar with them and familiar with the hadith, but we'll just mention them to remind you to keep up the motivation and to recognize what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you tawfiq, the success to do. Because not everybody is seeking knowledge. Not everybody recognizes the importance of seeking knowledge. And even amongst those that recognize the importance of seeking knowledge, some don't have the motivation to do that. And from amongst the people that recognize it and have the motivation to do it, there's also many that don't have access to scholars. So you have, mashallah, been given the tawfiq to have your Islam, to recognize the benefit of knowledge, to have the motivation to seek knowledge, and then to have access to knowledge, to have access to seeking knowledge. So the ayah that's mentioned in the Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises the people of ilm over those that don't have ilm. Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ, that verily the scholars from amongst the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those are the ones that have khashya. And according to some of the ulama of suluk, they say that the maqam of khashya, to have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that level, khashya, is only for the ulama. Only the ulama can have that maqam of khashya. Other people can have khawf. They can have fear of Allah at a certain level. But there's a higher level, a more subtle level of fear and witnessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is only reserved for the ulama. And the only way to get that, of course, is through seeking knowledge, through going out in the path to seek knowledge. The Prophet Muhammad also said in a hadith that if the student of knowledge passes away, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve all of us, if he passes away while he's on the path of ilm, of seeking knowledge, he will be raised on the Yawm al-Qiyamah one daraja, one level below the prophets, below the anbiya. And I actually know of, from my studies in Mauritania, I know of two students, there were other people, but two specific students that died while they were on the path of knowledge. One was bitten by a poisonous snake and passed away while he was memorizing Quran. And another person drowned in the lake also while he was memorizing Quran. And as sad as it is to lose a believer, and we know that in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the kuffar, فَمَا بَكَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ السَّمَاء. The heavens did not weep for the kafir, for the death of the kafir. And what is the weeping of the sky? Some people, when they hear the weeping of the sky, what would you automatically think? It's the rain. But according to the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that the weeping of the sama is the shafaq al-ahmar. You all know the shafaq, right, from studying the ahkam of maghrib, when it goes in, when it goes out. That redness that we see in the sky in the west after the sun goes down, that's the weeping of the sky. But it's the weeping of the sky for the death of the believer, the mu'min. Because it's sad when the earth loses another believer. The hut in the ocean, the fish in the ocean, weep over the death of a believer. And I'm sure most of you have heard what whales sound like, right? Doesn't it sound like, what would you say it sounds like? Moaning, right? Like moaning. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that the fish in the ocean, the hut in the ocean, are moaning for the death of the believer. So the maqam of a believer is very high. It's very high in the sight of Allah. And sometimes to illustrate this to people, I ask them, I say, what would you do? How would you feel if the Kaaba was destroyed? And we know at the end of time, the Kaaba, it will be destroyed. But imagine right now, before your very eyes, the Kaaba was destroyed. How would it make you feel? And what would you think the reaction of the Muslim Ummah would be to whoever aggressed against the Kaaba and destroyed it? Just, you know what the Muslim Ummah would probably do. Yes, that's when we're finally going to get together. And one believer in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is better than the Kaaba. One believer, one mu'min. The iman that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in our heart is not a simple thing. And Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, when he used to look at the Kaaba, he would say, مَا أَعْظَمُكِ وَمَا أَعْظَمُ شَأْنِكِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهِ لَشَأْنُ مُؤْمِنْ وَاحِدْ أَعْظَمُ مِنْكِ. he would speak to the Kaaba, but really he's speaking to himself and those around him. He would say how amazing you are, the Kaaba, and how amazing you are in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with Allah. But the state of one believer is greater than the Kaaba. So we know the death of a believer, it's heavy on creation, on everything in khalq. But we're happy for the state of that believer that died in talab al-ilm, because on Yawm al-Qiyamah, that's when he'll get his reward, being resurrected one daraja below, one level below the Anbiya. So it's a high maqam to be a student of knowledge, a seeker of knowledge. And the foundations of Islam is all based on knowledge. You can't do anything, even from being a believer, except with knowledge. فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا. Know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one, وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لِذَنْبِكَ. He gives first the order. Allah says, know that your Lord is one, and seek forgiveness for your sin. So if you look in the tartib of this order, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first gave the order for knowledge. He said, no, fa'alam. Know that your Lord is one, and that there's no Lord except for Him, and then seek forgiveness for your sin. Then do the amal. And they said one of the lata'if of the Arabiya is that even in the word ilm and amal, which you have in the ilm, you have ayn, lam, mim. And in amal you have ayn, mim, lam. In the huruf al-abjadi, in the alphabetical order of the Arabic, what comes first, the mim or the lam? Lam. It comes first. So even in ilm, when you look at it with ilm and amal, you see ayn, lam, mim. If you were to put them alphabetically ordered, you'll find in the dictionary, ilm comes before amal. You have to have knowledge for amal. And the beliefs in our heart is part of our action, it's part of our amal. So our belief is part of our amal. The feelings that we have in our heart is part of our amal. So to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to believe in Allah, you have to know Him first. And so to be a believer, you have to have knowledge. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. This is a hadith that many people are familiar with. Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every believer. But most people that know this hadith don't understand it in its proper context. They'll use it as a motivation to study law, or to study medicine, or to study engineering. And there's no doubt that within the history and the tradition of the Muslim empire, we had a great tradition of knowledge. Aside from just the Sharia sciences and Aqeedah and so forth, there was also the medicine and the inventions and so on and so forth. And there's no doubt that that sprang from the motivation to study in general. They studied the deen first, and then the importance of knowledge, they would go on to other subjects. But the Prophet ﷺ, in this hadith, what is he talking about? Is he talking about medicine? Is he talking about law? Is he talking about engineering? He's talking about the ilm that every single one of us should know. It's a fariḍah. It's not a fard ayn, it's not an individual obligation to study medicine, to study law, to study engineering, even though our societies need this, and it's a fard kifayah to have this. But the ilm that every single one of us has to know is to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how to worship Him. That's why it's upon every single person. Many people have the idea that ilm, it's only for the people that want to be a hafiz of the Quran and stand here in Ramadan. It's only for the people that want to sit in the mufti seat, right? But if you look in the history of the Muslims, ilm was with everybody. I tell my students, you can be a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. Just make sure your butchering is hand slaughtered, right? Don't flip the switch on the machine slaughter. But when you seek out knowledge, everybody should be seeking out knowledge. And if you look at even the seerah of the ulama that came before us, a lot of them had occupations that was not directly involved in teaching. And even if they were teaching, that's not where their sustenance was coming from. Abu Hanifa, as everybody knows, was a trader in silk. Imam Sahnun, who was one of the greatest students, not of Imam Malik, but of preserving the Maliki madhab, he studied with Ibn al-Qasim. And Ibn al-Qasim was the main student of Imam Malik. And if it wasn't for Sahnun, the Maliki madhab would not have been preserved. Because it was Imam Sahnun from Tunis who preserved the Maliki madhab through the Mudawwana. And he studied with Ibn al-Qasim. And he didn't have enough funds to make it to Medina to study with Imam Malik. And so he used to say, قَبَّحَ اللَّهُ الْفَقَرُ أَدْرَكْتُ مَالِكًا وَقَرَأْتُ عَلَى Ibn al-Qasim. He says, may Allah make faqr ugly. because I lived at the time of Malik, but I was only able to study with Ibn al-Qasim. But the secret is that he was the one who preserved the Maliki madhab, Imam Malik's madhab. But he used to have a donkey that he would go to the market and use to carry loads for people. And so he would study 6 months out of the year, and he would work for 6 months out of the year. He didn't have, a lot of people, they wait around, they say, okay, I'm going to study once I get the funding, once I get the grant. But that's not the reality for most people. And Imam Sahnun used to say, كَيْفَ يَقْرَأُ مَنْ لَا حِمَارَ لَهُ. How can somebody study if they don't have a donkey? Because he used to have a donkey, and that's how he supported himself so he could study knowledge. So this was the example of the ulama, that they were seeking knowledge whatever the case was. Some people are waiting for the optimum situation. I find a lot of people, they say, you know, brother, I'm going to study once I go overseas. Okay, 1 year goes by, 2 years goes by, 3, 4, 5, 10 years go by. I'm going to study. I can't wait to study. To go overseas, and studying abroad is real study. And yet there's people that are becoming ulama in America, in the UK, through the systems that are being established there. You don't have to go out. You don't have to wait for that dazzling journey that will take you to the far corners of the Muslim world to sit with various groups. You could study with one person and get everything that you need right in your home city. And Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, said that one of the things that the student of knowledge should be aware of is only studying with mashahir al-ulama. One of the afat al-ilm, one of the downfalls, the pitfalls of study, is that a student says, I'm only going to study with the big scholars. I'm only going to study with the big scholars. And similar to that would be people that say, I'm only going to study once I go overseas. Once I go to Qarawiyin, Azhar, Deoband, I'm not going to come to a masjid and sit in on halaqas in my home country. That's not real study. But if you look at the thamara, the fa'ida, where is the fruit able to be picked from? And that's what the talib al-ilm, he goes out and he seeks, just like the nahl, when it goes out, it goes around everything. Even if it's a war zone, the bee will still go out and go circumvent all of those treacherous areas. Go to this nectar, this nectar-bearing plant over here. Go back, fly over things, fly over problems, under problems, through problems, to get this nectar over here, to go back to its hive, and then produce shifa lin-nas. That's the talib al-ilm. You should be like a bee. And just go wherever it is. If it's online, if it's in person, if it's one person, whoever it is, you're seeking knowledge from wherever it is. And there are many stories of the Salaf that even on their deathbeds, they were still thinking about masail, thinking about matters. Because a lot of things that we study, it may seem theoretical. You might open up the books, especially for the people of higher studies of fiqh, you read, when is that going to happen? Right? Oh my goodness, why did they discuss this thing? But if you think that studying your ilm is just for this dunya, then it's not going to make sense. But if you realize that your maqam on Yawm al-Qiyamah and in the Jannah is going to be established by your amal here, and the best amal being ilm, then you know that when you study those fiqh rulings, yes, it is to help people here in the dunya and help yourself, but the ultimate thing is for your maqam on the Day of Judgment. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a high maqam. So even if you study the entire, everything that's available for you, and you only benefit yourself, and you never have to unravel the intricacies of a bay' or of a marriage matter or so on and so forth, you're getting reward for that. So don't be deluded by your nafs or by the shaitan and thinking that it's not worthy of studying. So Imam al-Ghazali says, don't study, he said, beware of only studying with the mashahir of the ulama, and we can take from that also that somebody says, I'm only going to study in the big institutions. Also, from that wisdom that we get from Imam al-Ghazali, that a person should remember that he can get something from a serious student of knowledge, or just a simple student of knowledge, that he might not get from the greatest alim of his time. And there's a saying that says, قَدْ يُوجَدُ فِي النَّهْرِ مَا لَا يُوجَدُ فِي الْبَحْرِ. You might find something in the river that you'll never find in the ocean. The ocean, as expansive as it is, and the amount of wondrous things that are in the ocean, you might find something, you might find a pearl, a freshwater pearl, in the river that's more valuable than anything that you could pull out of the ocean. So you might have somebody that's a serious student of knowledge, or a beginning scholar, a beginning alim, and you could be able to get from him what you wouldn't have access to if you were sitting with the greatest scholars. So we should all have qana'ah, contentment with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us. If we're in a situation where we're not able to go overseas, we're not able to study full time, don't allow that to distract you from studying. Don't wait for that optimum situation. Because the nafs and the shaitan are just going to say, just wait, just wait. And our greatest enemy is our nafs, even before the shaitan, and even before the tughat, and the zalimeen, and the new, the indefinite detainment, and all of those things that they're passing. Before all of those things, our greatest enemy is our nafs. And the nafs, one of the biggest things, and one of some of the ulama of suluk have said that the root cause of all diseases of the heart is procrastination. Tahajjud, I'll do that when I'm older. Hijab, I'll do that when I'm older. I'll get to that. I'll read I'll read the sciences now. I'll do tatbiq. I'll implement it later. I'll do it later, later, and then what happens? Then the person's on their deathbed. Ya laytani. And then they're on Yawm al-Qiyamah. This constant procrastination. If you look, one of the greatest examples that we have from our day and age is the Sheikh of the Qur'an in Egypt, who passed away 2 or 3 years ago. Sheikh Muhyiddin al-Kurdi. He was the Sheikh of the Qur'an in Damascus. You know what his job was? Growing up and where he memorized the Qur'an? Hafsa should have this on the standards on their website. He memorized Qur'an in his butcher shop. He was a butcher. And he used to hang the page of the Mus'haf that he was reading right as he's chopping the meats. And he memorized Qur'an, and he became the Sheikh of the Qur'an in Egypt, in Damascus. Which is not a simple feat. So somebody could have an endowment, sitting in a masjid. His family is supporting him. Everybody is supporting him. Everything's set up strategically for him to study, and yet he doesn't get it. And somebody else in a butcher shop, or I know another brother, Tunisian brother, he memorized the Quran on his bike while riding to school. You know how you can balance it? He memorized the Quran. That was part of his memorization. He memorized it while he was on his bike, working on his PhD. So don't be deluded by saying, I'm going to wait until the optimum situation, till I get settled, financially settled, family settled. Just, you have to do it now. You have to be Ibn Zamanika, the son of your moment. Right now is the moment to study. Right now is the time to do amal. And the last thing I'll just end on is for the talib al-ilm, it's very, very important to remember silatul rahim, maintaining and growing your kinship bonds. First and foremost with our blood, with our parents. But equally as important in maintaining with our blood and our relatives is maintaining the bond that we have in our circles of knowledge. When you study with somebody, that person becomes like your father. And Imam Ali radiallahu anhu, karramallahu wajhahu, said that if a person teaches you one letter, one harf, you become his abd. You become his slave. Not literally, of course, but metaphorically speaking. He says you become his abd. And the ulama have said that the sheikh that has the greatest haqq upon you is not the sheikh that finished your studies. He's the sheikh that taught you alif, ba, ta, tha. That might have been for some of us our parents. It might have been our older siblings. Why is it? Because they gave us the foundation. How can you study the Quran and the ulum and everything if you don't know alif, ba, ta? So, and every sheikh along that way, even if it was just one letter, Imam Ali said, إِنَّهُ لَعَبْدُ for just one harf, if one letter comes out, that you become the slave of that person. So remember that rahim that you have with your teacher, every single person that you've studied with, and it's even a good practice to just to keep record of that. Anybody that you've studied with, to make dua for them, and to keep contact with them, because if for anybody that studied, or for parents, for parents that have had children move out, one of the greatest things that's hard for them is that, oh, my child doesn't call me. They don't write to me. And by extension also other relatives. Oh, my cousin doesn't call me, I don't see that. It's one of the things that hurts people the most, that the people that they have a rahim with don't stay in contact with. And so just like we have to maintain our rahim, our kinship bonds with our relatives, we have to maintain kinship bonds with our teachers and with our fellow students. If your teacher is your parent, then your fellow students are your brothers and sisters. So it's not, and we're not doing this to build up like exclusivity, or like ta'assub, like asabiyya, like a gang mentality. Oh, it's us, it's the tulab and it's them. That's not the case. But just like in your family, you have a specific relationship with your siblings. It doesn't mean that that relationship with your siblings causes you to mistreat people outside of your family, but it's part of your identity. Part of your identity is knowing where you came from. And so you have to maintain this with your siblings and with your teachers. And the last thing, Imam Malik said, لَيْسَ الْعِلْمُ بِكَثْرَةِ الرِّوَايَةِ. Imam Malik said that knowledge is not about كَثْرَةُ الرِّوَايَةِ, about studying, about just having a lot of ilm, just having a lot of book knowledge or riwayah narration. Ilm, he said, is a nur that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in your heart. And if we're not implementing what we study, then there's no benefit to our ilm. And if it was just, if the status of a person was just by studying, then who would be the most righteous today in the creation? The shaitan, Iblis. He was there before our father Abuna Adam was created. You don't think Iblis has the qira'at al-ashar memorized? And the qira'at al-shadha? And the kutub al-sihah al-sitta? And all the other 50 or more collections memorized? Bil-asani? With the jarh and the ta'dil? He knows it all. He tried to get in there to mess up the hadith science, to mess up people's understanding. And his job is to work with the ulama. He goes to misguide the ulama. He doesn't misguide the average person, because he knows if he misguides one alim, that alim can then misguide many people. So if ilm was just based on how much you know, then Iblis would be the most righteous person. But that's not the case, because he had kibr and he didn't have amal. He didn't have implementation. And the ilm without amal is not called ilm anymore. It's called a hujjah, a proof. And the reason why it's a proof is because it's a proof against us on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Allah will tell the people that know, says, this person disobeyed me and he didn't know. Even though ignorance is not an excuse of Allah, but he didn't know. But you knew. You knew what you had to do and you didn't do it. And we know the hadith about the people that have memorized the Quran or have understanding of the Quran, and don't implement it, there's a special place in hell for them. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And also, we know that Ibn al-Hajj in the Madkhal